All right. Hi there. My name is Patrick Ewers. I'm the founder and CEO of Mindmaven. We're an executive coaching firm that helps leaders achieve true greatness by focusing on relationships. And we do that primarily by freeing up about a day a week, 12 hours, by changing the way you would work with an executive assistant. This is basically our second installment of our Human First series. If you haven't seen yet our last video with Nick Mehta, the CEO of Gainsight, I would highly recommend you check it out. It was a very energetic and awesome session. But today I'm super thrilled to be joined by Noah Glass. Noah is the CEO of Olo, and Olo is a SaaS company that focuses on helping restaurants, over 600 brands, basically increase sales, boost efficiency, but I think most importantly helps these companies, these restaurants, make every guest feel like they're special, feel like they're regular. And we're hitting Noah at a really good time because I think Olo was just recognized recently as the number one in the dining category of Fast Company. Is that right? It's annual list as one of the world's most innovative companies in that space. And so I think that's awesome. But we're not here for Olo. We are particularly here for Noah. And I have to say, this is a very special personal moment for me because I've been working with Noah for almost 3 years. And so the one thing I can tell you is that everything we're going to be talking about, I've actually seen firsthand. It's real. It is how Noah is. And so I can't wait to basically have this chat with you. So with that, Noah, welcome on board.
Thanks for having me, Patrick.
The first question I have for you is why have you chosen a human first approach to leadership?
Well, I want to answer your question with a question, sort of ask you to define the term. I'm sure that with Nick and his awesome interview, repeat listeners understand what you mean by that, but I want to make sure I understand human first and what it means to you.
Yeah. Didn't see that coming, but it's very easy. I think human first is basically different ways you can describe it. Human first means basically people that lead as a human or that have a very human approach to their leadership style. Hence, human first. But basically, the thinking behind it is a simple one. Is that basically nobody's ever been able to achieve true greatness or their fullest potential without help from others. It's a state that doesn't exist. And so great leaders have only one job, and that is to get people to follow them. And at Mindmaven, we simply believe the best way to do that is to do it in a very human way, in a very connecting way. Basically, human first is just the art of leading and growing a company by leveraging the humanness of the human condition.
Okay, well that resonates with me on a number of levels, and I think probably is why we've had such a great working relationship over the past 3 years. I think maybe before answering directly about leading human first, I want to reflect a little bit on what we do at Olo, which I think is potentially misunderstood by some as, yes, we're this platform that is helping restaurants to become more digital. But I think that sometimes people hear digital and digital transformation and more automation, and they think, ooh, that feels cold, and it feels like something that, becomes very transactional. And I go to restaurants to be human and to have this very human experience of fueling myself with food, yes, but like enjoying different flavors and tastes. And I love those human interactions that I have with a server and a maitre d'. I think a lot of what our platform is about is a human first experience in restaurants. It's how do you use data and how do you use this digital transformation happening in restaurants to make restaurants more human. And I use the word hospitable a lot. Hospitality, that's the industry that we serve. We talk about Olo as the engine of hospitality. And again, I think that's a little counterintuitive to people. They think this platform is going to make things very transactional. No, we want to make things more hospitable in restaurants, not less hospitable, but use the tool of the digital transformation to do that. So that I think is a good jumping off point for understanding Olo and some of that mission that draws people to Olo, and that I, am certainly on the lookout for when we're interviewing people, when I'm interviewing executives, when I'm speaking with people who've just joined the team. I want to make sure that that resonates with them, that they are using their time and their talents, which are very finite resources, on this mission, and that they care about it and they want to help restaurants and all of the stakeholders of restaurants. So that's a little bit of a digression. I apologize for that. But I think that my leadership style was really forged over the first 8 years of Olo, when we were a really small team. We were super, super early to this opportunity. We were talking about mobile ordering in restaurants starting in 2005, many years before iPhone was a thing, Android was a thing, on-demand services were a thing. So because of being so early, it took a long time to get to product market fit. And doing the responsible thing as an entrepreneur in 2008, 2009 was keeping the team really small. That was the big source of burn. And that meant being really close with this team and being really family-like with this team. We use that term of, Olo is a second family to us. And this group of 12 stayed together for those first 8 years and just really got to know one another and our strengths and weaknesses and our first families, and celebrating milestones of weddings, and also mourning together when bad things happen. But I think that connection to the team is a big part of human first leadership for me, was those first 8 years. And then when we did hit product market fit and knew that we were going to be scaling up, the most important thing to me was that we preserve that kind of special atmosphere and culture within the Olo culture. And so I hope that people would say that I've remained the same sort of human first leader, to use that phrase, that I was in the first 8 years in the now about 10 years that have happened since.
Okay. And so when you say you hope that you stay that way, what are things that basically you do in your day-to-day life that you think are making you feel somewhat confident that you are?
I think the first thing that I've done, with a lot of help from you individually and Mindmaven beyond you, is to create a how I work document. And right. I think that was how I work was well understood by the initial, group of 11 that weren't me in those first 8 years, but then sort of documenting not just the culture and the values of the company, but me as an individual and how I work. I think it was a big piece of effort. We spent many weeks, many revisions and iterations writing that, but the ROI on that has been massive. It's paid off.
I'm going to ask you for examples on the ROI, but what I want to do for the benefit of our listeners here is just give a little bit of a background of what a how I work document is, because I think that's really powerful. And I'm really happy you brought it up, because it's actually something that is so small and so overlooked often, yet very powerful. And I hope you'll have some stories to share. But the how I work document is a very simple concept. It's the idea of you writing a user manual about yourself. It can come in very various forms and formats. I know that you and I worked on a very long one that actually could be considered a book, the Book of Noah, that goes into very specifics, but you can also go and make it a 2 or 3 page bullet point list, mostly as a conversation guide rather than a self-informing type of document. But it basically has elements in it of for example, your values, of things you expect from people working with you, what people can expect from you. It has even elements of vulnerability in it, like how can you help me improve? Where do I feel like I am still not the leader I want to be, et cetera, right? And the power of that document is, in our views, and we've seen this happen quite a few times, is that when you have it in place, you can basically shortcut the process that it takes for somebody you've hired to learn how to best operate with you. You are basically cutting out all that trial and error where basically there are certain elements of culture that are different or approaches. One element that we put into how I work documents are pet peeves. For example, mine is the word should. I hate it when people write we should do. It just is something that sets me off, you know. And so it gives elements of that one. And so yes, you and I worked on it. And why are you saying it paid off in terms of ROI?
So, I mean, since writing it, I have distributed it to all of my direct reports, and some of them are brand new to the relationship. I mean, we've hired people who've become direct reports since writing that document, and it's like a shorthand for like, here's how I work, literally. Here's how I think. Here's what's important to me. Here's how I'm going to approach big decisions that we have. Here's how I think about things that are important and things that are urgent, and the fact that those aren't the same thing, and how I draw the distinction between the two. It's enabled people to, when they have an idea and they're trying to persuade me of something, put it into a form that resonates with me, where I understand the kind of decision that they're looking for me to make, whether it's a one-time decision, one-way door type 1 decision, or much more often a two-way door. And it's something that we're going to do and think about it as something we can easily reverse if we need to, and can therefore make a much faster decision and have a very different bar of how much information do we need, how much data do we need, how certain do we need to be if it's a type 1 versus a type 2. Like that's an example of something that I've picked up along the way. That's a Jeff Bezos Amazon thing that I've sort of inherited in studying that company and some of the successful leadership frames that they use. But it's something that if you didn't know that about me, you wouldn't be able to make an argument and just use the phrase of, I think this is a type 2 decision. Here's why. And so here's what I'm thinking about it. And then give me the rationale that convinces me that, yeah, we should move forward with that. And we can always reverse course if we decide this is not the right thing down the line.
Yes. And now we need to connect that to why is that actually a very fundamental approach to being human first? You know, like, why did you bring it up? And the answer, I think, and I would love to hear your thoughts to it, is simply because it puts you into the servitude of the people that are actually reporting to you. Right? I believe you are a leader who believes in the, service CEO kind of role. And when you do that, you're basically just giving this as a tool of your service to them to basically educate them on how to best operate with you, how to best understand you. And the benefits are obvious. You get faster to this beautiful, working relationship that every CEO is wishing to have with every single direct report they have, one that is deep in trust, well understanding, and the communication style starts to align with each other in terms of how you operate. And so that to me is like a way of basically saying, look, I'm here. And this is the summary I want to give. It's like, I'm here and I'm giving you this tool because you're here. I'm here to help you be empowered to basically be able to do your best work yet. And part of you being able to do so is that you need to understand how I operate so that you can position things in such a way that you get the results you're actually looking for. Does that feel about right?
Yeah, 100%. I don't want to be a roadblock for my team. I want to be the opposite of that. I want to be an accelerant. I want to help them break down barriers and do what they're trying to do faster and go further than they could on their own. And I think that is, yes, part of the definition of being a human first, or a sort of a servant leader, or a hospitable leader, I guess, to use my term. But I think that's so important. And the How I Work document is like the ultimate set of shortcuts for how do you work with Noah to serve you in that way and to be an accelerant for what you're trying to do.
That's awesome. Yes. And I want to add one more thing before we move on. And that is one of my favorite moments in working with you. I remember just how much it put a big fat smile on my face was that you had a lieutenant working for you, right? Somebody who's been a partner of yours for over 8 years. I think your former COO, really great human being, by the way. And you shared it with him as well, right? And this is somebody who now really already understood you, right? And do you remember what he said to you when he read it?
I want to know what put a big fat smile on you. I remember a lot of the things he said to me, but I want to know what put a big fat smile on your face.
Well, okay, so what I remember that he said is that he came to you and saying, like, look, even though I've worked with you for 8 years, I've still learned a ton from reading this.
Mm-hmm.
A, new things, but B, I understand better why you're doing certain things the way you're doing them. I just knew you're doing them that way, but I never really went that deep to saying, where's this coming from? Where's it sourced from, right? And to me, that was like the reason why I was smiling about this was because it's like the fundamental evidence that this document is exceptionally powerful. If somebody who's worked with you for 8 years, and most of our listeners probably don't have a single person with whom they've worked for that long, still comes back and is grateful for having had access to that document, then anybody who's new to the game, would just love it.
I'm remembering exactly what was surprising to him that is in the document, and he knew at a deeper level what was going on after reading it. So thinking about this type 1, type 2 decision, sometimes on a big decision, I'll say my equivalent of I want to sleep on that, or I want to, I say, because we're related to the food business, I want to marinate on that a little bit. And I revealed, I guess, to him in this document that a lot of the time what's happening there is I want to talk to my wife about this. My wife is a huge consigliere to me, and to Olo. She, from the very beginning has been. And so oftentimes I'll say that. And what it means is I want to have this as a dinner conversation. I want to get my wife's feedback and sort of beat it up around the dinner table. What's been fun over the years is that now my son, who's 6, is also into the fray. And he gives really good advice. He now knows that giving daddy advice is the family sport. But that helps me to come back the next day, having slept on it, yes, having marinated in it, but also having now 2 consiglieres giving me the advice that I need to really feel good about a decision that we're making.
Yes.
And that was the big reveal to him. I remember that. And that puts a smile on my face thinking about him saying that. He was not surprised by the fact that I like Oxford commas. That is legendary at Olo, that I'm always correcting people's writing with Oxford commas. And I maintain to this day that it makes for much more clear writing than without Oxford commas, but that he knew all along.
Right. And for example, that's just such a beautiful example of exposing that to people working with you. Some people might mistake that as micromanagement. But, and put meaning into something where there isn't more meaning than that is just a pet peeve of yours. But if you share that with people, then they have, less question marks around it. And that basically lets them to work with you in a lot more straightforward way. But you took it already a little bit into your personal life here. And I wanted to guide our conversation. So there's one thing that I think you do that I absolutely love. And that is that, if I remember correctly, you're a big journaler. And you're actually quite disciplined about it, which is, I think, the hardest thing about journaling. But as you journal, you also try to write down at least once a day one thing you're grateful for, a very solidly and very well-developed gratitude practice that you have that I would actually, by the way, recommend to anyone who wants to keep burnout and stress at bay. It's one of the most powerful things you can do to actually change your brain chemistry on a day-to-day basis. But no one is doing this. And I think you found interesting ways of translating that into how you lead in some form or other. I'd love you to talk about that a little bit more.
Yeah, you're right. I've been journaling every day without missing a day for over 10 years now. I think actually closer to 12 years now if I count up the number of entries that I have and divide by 365. It's for me, obviously a ritual. It's a habit. It's a huge part of maintaining my equanimity And from working with me, that's sort of like my goal is to be this stoic kind of thinker with equanimity as the ideal state. As part of that, not for that full time, but I'd say for the last 3 years, I've added a section at the end, and it's just a template that I fill out. But it reminds me, to write 3 things that I'm grateful for, people that I love, and then set my intention for the day by saying, what is one thing that you and only you can do today? And I picked that up from YPO, from one of my forum mates who has been doing this himself for a long time, gratitude journaling, but also in that format. And it's super healthy. It makes me feel good to write those things down, remember all the things I'm grateful for, and take a moment and pause and sort of let that soak in. I always do this first thing in the morning, to remember the people that I love, and then to really set the intention for the day. And I think what you're referring to in terms of how I've taken that gratitude and turned it into something that impacts the human first leadership is that oftentimes I'm grateful for my team, and I'm grateful for people on my team. And I want them to know, if I'm articulating to some future version of myself, looking back at this gratitude journal, what I'm grateful for, I certainly want them to know in the moment what I'm grateful for. And with your help, we've implemented a program around praise and recognition. And maybe, I'll invite you to sort of give the clinical definition of praise and recognition as a program, and then I can go into how I've used it.
Yeah, of course. Well, so praise and recognition is a very simple concept. It's basically just finding ways to praise and recognize your team, and it's I think very few people will doubt that is to be seen as one of the best ways to reinforce or strengthen the culture you're trying to build in the organization. Only that a lot of CEOs and leaders actually bias towards the praise, and sometimes make a really big mistake of praising just for the sake of praising, sometimes even where the praise isn't actually that earned. And so the praise and recognition program is the idea of basically taking a nudge down and actually focusing more on the recognition part of praise and recognition, by just basically recognizing people for doing their job. Because if you ask around, what you will find out is that what most people want, right? For example, if you have a certain percentage in your team of people that would self-categorize themselves as introverts, then they actually don't want to be praised too much. They don't like being the center on the of attention, and for sure putting them on a pedestal in a public forum like an all hands meeting can be actually categorized as a nightmare for them, right? And so this notion of praise and recognition is to just basically sensitize the organization around you, right, to listen to things that are worth recognizing. Right. For example, your assistant can look into those tools that you guys use. People use Culture Amp. Other people use Namely. I think you guys are on Namely, if I remember correctly. Right. And there's data there that allows you to basically see, oh, this person did this for this client, and it was maybe not that special, just like sort of north of neutral, like a little bit more positive than neutral. But it was along the lines of something that is backed up by the culture you're building or the value that you're trying to implement, right? And then the assistant can find those things and actually produce interactions, or cause you to basically send interactions to that individual in a one-on-one fashion, such as via email and so on and so forth. And so one quick example for those that are listening that is very pragmatic: if you are leading a company of 30 people or more, you will have departments from whom you've never hear, right? A classic example is the accounting department or the IT department. These are these weird departments where if you don't hear from them, that's a huge victory because they're doing their job right. And if you do hear from them, it's often because something goes wrong. But nobody celebrates them like somebody gets celebrated by bringing in a $2 million deal, right? And so, for example, one thing that you can do with these people is to simply send them a message saying, hey, I never hear from you guys. And what that actually means is that you guys are absolutely doing your job in the way you're supposed to be doing this job. And you have no idea how big of a gift that is for me as a CEO to never actually hear from you in that sense. And so that's sort of the extension of like gratitude journaling to basically sharing the gratitude you have as a leader by implementing a programmatic approach of just listening in on what's going on in the organization and showing that the leader, the person on the top, is actually caring about even those small things, and it can have a profound impact on culture. I'm curious, do you have what's your reaction to what has happened when you started doing this regularly?
Yeah, well, I want to reflect on what you just said a little bit, which is one thing I wanted to mention. I think I have learned a lot about being human first and putting my team first across all stakeholders from one of my mentors, who was a mentor, sort of a hero, and then a mentor, and then in this unbelievable stroke of luck became an investor and a board member. And so I got to work with him even more closely. This is
Danny Myers, right?
Danny Meyer, right? And he has this philosophy called enlightened hospitality, and it's about taking care of your team and making sure that, number one, you're hiring the right people, but then that you're taking care of those people and growing those people. And that if you do that, if you make your team feel good, that they're then going to take care of the customers and the partners in the community, and then ultimately your investors benefit from that.
Mm-hmm.
But he also, in that book, Setting the Table, that he's so well known for, just a great business book all around, even if you're not in this industry, he talks about the notion of hospitality, of every guest who walks in, you should imagine them wearing a sign around their neck that says, "Make me feel important." And I think what praise and recognition is, and using that as sort of a jumping off point, it's less about like important necessarily. It's just make me feel seen.
Mm-hmm.
People hate when they feel unimportant, and people hate when they feel like, I'm working so hard and nobody sees it. Like, what a terrible way that would be to go about your week feeling, or your year feeling. And just these little touch points of praise and recognition, even if it's not praise, to your point, if it's just recognition, I see you, and here's what I saw, and I want to thank you for that, and I'm grateful for that, because it ties back to what we're trying to do here and this value that we celebrate here. And it lifts people up in a very major way. And I think recently I had been doing this through email, programmatically. Programmatically, in that I would do it every week, and I would do maybe 5 of these a week, just to make sure I was sort of exercising that discipline of praise and recognition with routine. With your guidance and encouragement, I switched from doing that over email to doing it over video. And based on your recommendation, using this tool of Loom, which lets you record video and have a backdrop of whatever website you want or what have you. I've been recording those and sending them. They're no more than 25, 30 seconds long, if that. But I'll send them to people, and the reactions that I've gotten back have just been off the charts. I mean, it's like 10 times what the written word was, and it's in a form that I know people are saying to their spouse or their kids or somebody else, like, look what I just got. I just got this video. That's my CEO who just took the time out of his day to send this message to me. And they'll cherish that. And
do you have some quotes? Do you have some quotes of the reactions? Like maybe some examples that we can share here? Even if you're paraphrasing, because you can't like exactly know the original words anymore, but does anything come to mind?
Without naming names, one of the people who I just sent a Loom to, it was last week, and I was recognizing that it was her 16-year anniversary with Olo.
Wow.
And because we've worked together for so long, and we were together during that first 8 years, and I know her super well, I know the name of her husband and her son and their pet rabbit, and I was able to include all of that in my message to her without looking at anything. I just know her, and I know that she, despite having been out of college for a very long time, still enjoys natural light beer, which is, no offense, people who are from the Natural Light Beer Company, it is the worst beverage I think ever created on this earth.
Yes.
It tastes like seltzer water with a tiny bit of beer flavor, just as a joke.
Yes.
So I said, I hope that you're able to have a natty light, as it's called, to celebrate 16 years together. And, she wrote back pretty immediately to that message. And it was just like, my God, you know me so well. And that's exactly how I'm going to like celebrate this event, is by still drinking this terrible beer. But like that little insight, it was just the difference between something that felt very cold versus something that felt very personal.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was like a long, like, this has meant so much to me being here and throughout this journey, and how much I've grown and the company has grown. And but it starts with that human connection.
And so what I want to add to that is, like, isn't that the job of the CEO, is to basically create this human connectedness? Because like, you have somebody who's basically been following you for 16 years. That is the dream of zero regrettable attrition happening because of these things. And the thing that I want to point out is, this isn't a lot of work. This is 20 to 30 seconds that you do 4 to 5 times a week. So we're talking about an investment of a total of 15 minutes of your time.
Yeah.
So that's one thing why that's so powerful. The second thing is that when you do that, these interactions represent stories to those people. And we humans do what with stories?
Repeat them.
We share them, right? And they will share them at home, which is extremely powerful, because that's the one we turn to when we're in doubt. And then those people at home will remind you about how rare and unique it is to have such a leader, and is it really that bad that's going on? Number one. Number two is that you repeat it and share it with your co-workers. And then when a story gets repeated and shared over and over again, stories turn into legends, right? And to us at Mindmaven, that's how you actually can develop true and foundational and strong legendary leadership. This is how you can become a legendary leader, like those that we all look up to, where the legends are bigger than the person itself. And that just can be only good, especially if it's based on a wholesome, good behavior. And that to me is like the quintessential human first approach. All right, Noah, thank you so much for your time. And I really appreciate you spending this with us. And if anybody wants to learn more about those things we discussed, happy to react to it. Just shoot us an email, and we can help you out.
Patrick, thanks so much for having me, and thank you for nurturing the human first leader instincts that I have and developing them really so that I can do them at scale. And I think, doing them with my team, that's just one facet. It's then all the different stakeholder groups, my customers, my investors, my partners, my community. I hugely appreciate the work that you and I do together, the work that Mindmaven does. And I should also say, Mindmaven doesn't just work with me. Mindmaven works with a good chunk of the OLO leadership team. And I see that impact on a daily basis. So hugely grateful. This is my testimonial to you and Mindmaven. But thank you for having me on this podcast. And I encourage those who are looking to become more human first, or just get those habits reinforced and learn new tricks, to send Patrick an email.